Welcome back to the Movement Professional Podcast. I'm Dr. Chris Lab. So this week I'm going to continue my series on common misconceptions. Today I'm going to take on the controversial topic of weight loss drugs. Specifically, we're looking at drugs that have the active ingredient tirzepatide or semaglutide. So some of the trade names that you see are Mounjaro, Zepbound, Wegovy, Ozempic. Certainly, I'm not a physician. I'm not able to prescribe medication. So I'm not here to talk about the specific mechanisms of the drug. I'm really speaking it more as a bystander, a clinical bystander of having clients take the drug and find success with it. I also want to speak as a healthcare practitioner who works mainly with behavioral change and sees in the field that there is a bias against medicine that I feel is unnecessary and it's confusing to patients. And it also can just be a judgment that I often will get from patients before they know me or even family members before they know me, is that because I work in a field that is pro behavior change with exercise, nutritional changes, sleep changes, that I also have to be anti-medicine. And I think there's a little bit too much of that conversation going on, at least that I've seen. So I'm hoping this conversation will be able to kind of get at the way to look at medicine in a collaborative approach, but also just from a logical perspective of how we already look at many other things where we can fit medicine into the picture that help people's lives. And ultimately, it'll be a discussion about how we look at judgment and how useless and how harmful judgment can be when it comes to making positive health decisions for ourselves. So the number one misconception that I have seen so far with this medication is that individuals should be able to lose weight or help their type 2 diabetes without the medicine. And I just think that is such a short-sighted way to view the problem of weight loss, the process of weight loss, the process of type 2 diabetes. It's also just very ignorant to assume that everybody's in the same boat. And it also doesn't take into account that many individuals, and each one of my clients who has decided to take these medications, have been for years trying to make change through behavioral change and have made some great behavioral changes, but it's not a simple process. So this misconception can be taken outside of this discussion about the medicine and just looked at how we as a society view weight loss or those that are overweight. And we tend to moralize it in a manner that puts a lot of judgment towards the individual. And this, I think, is harmful from two different directions. One, it certainly creates unnecessary shame for some people, and it may, in many ways, not have people that need to engage with the world, with society a little bit more to actually make positive change in their life. It may make them not want to engage in because of shame, because of judgment from others. The other side of this is oftentimes individuals that may need to lose weight for health reasons may actually resist the idea of making change because they feel judged and they feel that the person that is the healthcare professional giving them advice doesn't understand their situation, because the idea of weight loss is so loaded with judgment and not connected to the multiple medical problems that are associated, but more to, if somebody is telling me that I have to lose weight for my health, they are judging me as being lazy, as not being someone who is taking care of myself. So I think just from every side, treating weight loss or how much weight somebody needs to lose from a place of judgment is insanely unhelpful. So when we look at these weight loss medications, if they are useful, and there's certainly time will tell about long-term effects and things like that, but we could say that about literally any drug, and we do say that about most drugs. So studies are always being done on drugs, but there is a time when they first come out that we don't have all the long-term data. So that's not unique for these drugs, but to say that somebody should lose weight without them is just a kind of an ignorant statement that doesn't take into account what those that they're referring to have already done and how difficult and process-oriented it is to have to lose weight, especially in the environment that we live in our country. The second misconception is that you will lose muscle mass. And I'm not saying that this is not true. I'm saying this is a bit overblown in my experience. And again, because it doesn't take into account what those that are taking the medicine that may be getting success with weight loss, what they are also doing and where they're coming from. So there's always a balance that has to be taken into consideration when we're looking at this idea of total body weight, total body mass being lost, and muscle mass being lost. And I think it's often discussed in a way that's very much like you can isolate one from the other. Many times, the thing that we can see change with the most ease is our body weight on a scale. The idea of muscle mass and assessing how much muscle mass we have is a much more difficult process and not a very accurate process for the most part. Now, it's certainly important to have muscle mass, and there's plenty of evidence that as we get older that we will go through sarcopenia and lose muscle mass. But there's also plenty of evidence that being overweight and obese is insanely unhealthy for us as we get older. So there's a balance here. And oftentimes the starting point is to lose weight. If one loses weight, a lot of times the processes that are involved in being able to become strong, put on muscle mass, they become a little bit easier. At least from an exercise standpoint, and this is something I've seen in the clinic, is losing 20 to 30 pounds makes strength training a bit easier. It makes the exercises that we do in the gym a bit easier. And there's always going to be people that choose to put more time into that process and people that don't. But if you compare one that is obese to one that is not obese, neither are in a great situation when it comes to muscle mass. If you lose a little bit of muscle mass in order to lose 20 to 30 pounds, you're probably in a better state of health. And eventually there's going to have to be a plan to maintain strength, maintain muscle mass. So that's something that is good for your body anyway. It's likely going to be an easier process to train and have the energy to train consistently if you are at a healthier weight. So although I don't think that's a solid misconception, I think it's definitely an overblown discussion point. And again, it doesn't take into account the individual. It's just a broad statement that beware, don't take these medicines because you're going to lose muscle mass. And again, it doesn't take into account what people are doing on top of taking the medicine. All right. And there's certainly ways to keep your strength. And I've seen this where clients are 20, 30, 40 pounds lighter, and they're still doing the same exercise, the same weight that they were doing before they lost that weight. And in many ways, they feel a lot better. They're moving better. They're moving with more fluidity, right? So there certainly depends on the case. It depends on the starting point. But to just say that you shouldn't take these because you're just going to lose muscle mass, it doesn't take into account the whole picture and where people are coming from. With any drug, there's going to be people that it's appropriate for and it's not appropriate for. That can't be a broad statement. That's not my decision to make. That's a physician's decision who would be prescribing the medicine. And outside of prescription, which this is prescription drugs at this point, we're already dealing with these spectrums of what we consume day in and day out anyway. To me, this addition of this effective drug does not change the landscape of what we see all the time anyway when we look at people taking different supplements and we look at people doing different diets, right? No matter what, you're going to have some type of process for looking at keeping a healthy weight, keeping a muscle mass where you want. If medicine can help one of those variables and make one of those variables easier, I'm all for it. As a healthcare practitioner, I do not want my job to have to be to help somebody lose weight. I want my job to have to be to help somebody live better, to help somebody get stronger. And oftentimes that is a goal when you work in fitness. One of the number one goals, and often when you work in physical therapy, when people have pain, is they want to lose weight. And that is a very indirect goal to have when you come in to see somebody that is helping you exercise or giving you advice about nutrition. What can be done in a session can be a very little benefit to someone's overall process for weight loss, for muscle mass gain. What we can do is educate, but if we can make that process of weight loss easier, it doesn't take away from our job to help people get stronger, help people move better, give people healthy advice on nutrition, give people healthy advice on sleep. You're just doing it now with somebody at a healthier weight. And in many ways, and this is certainly my judgment, but I hope it doesn't come off as a negative judgment towards anyone. But I think if the heavier and the more obese that someone appears, that can be an outward expression of some mental health problems underneath. So then to judge that person as they're not doing enough, they're lazy, do you really think that's going to be useful in helping somebody lose weight, knowing all that we have to do to actually maintain our weight, to keep ourselves into a good place? If you can make that process easier for someone, make that process easier. And I'm seeing that these medications do that. Misconception number 3 is that you will need to take them forever. This is not necessarily a misconception because it's false. It's a misconception because it's overblown, and it's an incomplete thought compared to any other thing that would be promoted for health. Any weight loss process, any process of maintaining weight, is a process for life. Exercising, eating a certain way. These are processes. These are not single interventions. So if a medicine is helpful, but you have to take it on an ongoing basis, it's no different than having to be mindful of your nutrition for life, than having to be mindful of your exercise and your activity for life, to be mindful of your sleep, these other habits that are promoted as only good, but they are in many ways much more complex for people to get right and perfect. And there's ultimately not a perfection to any of them. There's just an ongoing process of learning. So again, if you can have something make the process of weight loss easier, it never takes away from the idea that you have to do these healthy behaviors or that these healthy behaviors stay healthy, they stay important. It just makes every process easier for the individual that now has lost weight. And certainly there are times where you can lose too much weight. There are people that don't need to take these from a health perspective. They're taking them from an aesthetic perspective. That's not for me to judge. There's already people doing that with other supplementation, with aggressive diets. So that's not new. This, to me, is way more regulated because you have to get this from a physician, at least now. And I'm sure there's ways to get around that. But again, not a new problem. So the resistance to these drugs, to me, seems like it's not well thought out. And again, oftentimes you hear misconceptions that are not incorrect per se, but they're just not well thought through. They don't take an individual into account. They don't take what an individual is already doing into account. They don't take an individual's journey through their whole life into account. And I see this with weight loss, regardless of these medications, is in order to judge someone for being overweight, there is an assumption that they haven't tried to lose weight. And to me, that couldn't be farther from the truth. And I'm sure at some point in my career, I had harsher judgments about individuals that were overweight. But when you work with people and that's their goal to try to lose weight for over 15 years, you start to realize that the people that are overweight oftentimes are doing the most work to try to lose weight, and they have been for their whole lives. My personal experience is I've lost weight here and there for aesthetic purposes, for performance purposes, but I've never had to lose a substantial amount of weight. I've seen my clients work much harder and be much more wrapped in the process of losing weight than I'll ever be. And I have to appreciate that. So when I see these medicines working for clients, people I care about, for family members, I'm all on board. But let's not use our judgment of others and our moralizing of weight loss. Let's not let that get in the way of something that can be quite useful and life-changing for people. So I hope that was helpful. I didn't mean to get that passionate about it, but it's just something that I've seen of late. And I've actually been surprised with how effective these things are. And it's made me do a little bit of soul searching about what my value is as a healthcare practitioner, as a practitioner of movement that helps people make behavioral change. And one of the things I realized is I am relieved if I don't have to be the person that helps people lose weight. It takes nothing away from what I feel I do as a healthcare practitioner. So if you are somebody in health and fitness and you feel like these medicines are somehow taking away from what you do as a healthcare practitioner, you probably need a few more tools in your box, because that's not our job to make people lose weight. Our job is to help people make healthy decisions. And if they do that at a lighter weight, it doesn't change what we do. It oftentimes makes it easier. Hopefully it was useful. See you next time.